Good morning, gentlemen. बहुत अच्छा मौसम है. Let's get cracking on something very important. And what is that? ये है Russian election. You know, Russia has had a general election, a presidential election, and the man who has won for the sixth time is Vladimir Putin. And he's going to be president of Russia till 2030. It's a very big thing. Or Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has congratulated His Excellency Vladimir Putin. The Chinese president has also congratulated Putin. But अफसोस की बात यह है कि the American president and the Western democracies, I will use the word so-called democracies, haven't congratulated Putin at all, and they say it's a farcical election. You see, एक पुरानी हिंदी पिक्चर थी वक्त, it was a very old Hindi film in which Rajkumar mouths dialogue and he says, Chinoy Seth, जो शाहूकार शीशे के घरों में रहते हैं वो पत्थर नहीं फेंकते. In other words, it means that those who stay in glass houses don't throw stones at others. But unfortunately, this is what the Americans are doing. Now they say Putin has got no legitimacy in this election, but then what about the American last election where Donald Trump was cheated out of victory? I'll give you a small history. क्या हुआ था actually? Donald Trump was leading throughout in the votes which were cast on the ballot booths, on the ballots. And he had declared victory. But then suddenly the postal votes came and somebody counted them and Biden was made victorious. There was a lot of surreptitious talk about it. बहुत सी insinuations थी. Even the Americans themselves doubted the election, and there was a spontaneous reaction on this thing, and a Capitol Hill की insurrection, what is called it, for which Donald Trump was being tried on criminal charges, erupted. It was a spontaneous anger against the type of election which was conducted in America. And that, gentlemen, the Americans must bear in mind before you keep judging other people and say, ये फार्सिकल इलेक्शन है. They even say the Indian election is fraud. देखिए एक बात समझ लीजिए. Democratic elections, whether they are in Russia, India or America, they are not 100% foolproof. They are flawed to a certain extent because certain constraints are in existence. But the fact remains that the people are allowed to go and vote, and nobody goes and tells them in their ear, please vote for so and so. Now, Vladimir Putin has won 87% of the vote. And if you recollect, in the first election which he fought in 1999, he had won 53% of the vote. So there's been a gradual improvement over that. Another thing to be noted is that the areas of eastern Ukraine which have been occupied by Russia and incorporated in the Russian state, almost 95% voted for Putin. मैं नहीं कहता कि this is a foolproof election and everything is honky-dory, ऐसी नहीं है. Because it is to an extent a flawed election like the election in America or for that matter in India. But it is the best bet. At least it is not an autocratic state. And now Putin will be in power in 1930 and the constitution has been amended so he can be voted in for another 6 years. And if he lives, he will be president in 1936. And in that case, he would be greater in terms of span of rule than Catherine the Great. Of course, it will be difficult to catch up to Ivan the Terrible or Peter the Great. I think Peter or Ivan, one of them, ruled up to 43 years. And that may be a little difficult, but he'll definitely overtake Catherine, and he's already going to overtake Joseph Stalin. So, gentlemen, let us be very clear about it that the election has taken place. People have voted. Can anybody deny that? But yes, कुछ opposition जो थी was almost zero. That means there was no significant opposition leader opposing Vladimir Putin. And even one man who could have made a difference, that's what the Western press is saying, that is Navalny, and he's dead, died in the prison in Siberia. I don't think if he had contested, he would have won more than 2% of the votes, because the Russian people are not very happy with him. And in interviews all over Russia, even I have gone there and I have asked a few people what they feel about Navalny, and they say he was a traitor. He didn't respect the Russian system. Well, I will not say yes or no about it, because frankly, Navalny timed his own doom. He was in Germany after the attempted poisoning in Russia, and he should have stayed there instead of coming back. But I was told that there was going to be a deal worked out in which Navalny was going to be exiled abroad, and Putin had okayed it, but then he died. And I don't think Putin has had a hand in it at all. I mean, he died, maybe natural causes, it may be anything. You can't say what happened really. Well, gentlemen, that is the issue. And there was another candidate who was opposing Putin, but he couldn't get the requisite number of signatures to contest. Many of his signatures invalidated. Now, there were, I think, 2 or 3 other candidates who opposed Putin, but they were part of the establishment. I mean, they were in awe of Putin as it is, and they couldn't win any votes at all. So, gentlemen, one can say it's a flawed democracy, yes, to an extent, but a democracy all the same. You must remember that Stalin ruled for 29 years and there was no election. And earlier, the Tsars were ruling. Peter the Great, Ivan the Terrible, Catherine the Great, Tsar Nicholas II, they all ruled. And there were the elections. There were elections in Russia. The Duma was a rubber stamp. Whatever the Tsar or Stalin or Lenin did, they did it. So there is a big improvement over that, and we must give credit where it is due. And Vladimir Putin has won the election, so he needs to be congratulated. Now the question arises, why is the West angry with Putin? It's very simple. He's a man cast in the mold of Joseph Stalin. And he's the one who's standing up to the American hegemony. Probably nobody likes him. Who would like him? They like a man like Gorbachev or even Yeltsin, who keeps on saying, yes, 3 bags full. And Putin is not in that frame of mind. And Putin has gone on record to say that the breakup of the Soviet Union was a historical blunder. I also feel so. Probably if communism had not come to Russia, there's every chance that the Soviet Union would never have broken up. The Tsarist Empire would have continued. You must remember that the Tsarist Empire was continuing for centuries and it dominated Europe. They had defeated the Turks. They had occupied the whole of Eastern Europe. They colonized the whole of Central Asia, Siberia. They defeated the Japanese, the Chinese, and it was a very, very gigantic empire. And the Soviet Union took over, but then communism came. Now, communism is not a nationalist organization. And they talk of something else, and they do something else, and net result is communism spelled the doom of the USSR. Anyway, that's history. I don't know whether ever it will come back, but Putin is on the right track, and he's there to see that Russia gets its old glory back. It's not going to be easy. It's not easy at all, because there's China breathing down the neck of the Russians. Those are the close friends now, because both of them have a common enemy, that's the United States. And then there is India, the big factor. It's been close to the Russians for a good part of 6 decades. And that's a long period of time. And Russia stood by India in all conflicts, at all times. You must remember that the Americans played a dubious game earlier, as they always do. And they brought in so many resolutions in the Security Council in favor of Pakistan. And they were all vetoed by the Soviet Union, right from the time when Bulganin and Nikita Khrushchev took over as the first secretary of the Communist Party. And it continued that way till Gorbachev, and even much later, India had a pact with Russia in 1970, when Leonid Brezhnev was the first secretary of the Communist Party. So, gentlemen, this is all history. I'm just digressing to say that the close relations between India and Russia are something that can't be sneered at. And the Americans must accept it. I think they have accepted it. Now the question arises, what next is going to happen? Because even if Donald Trump wins or Biden wins, they won't last till 2030. The maximum they can go up to 2028. And once they go into oblivion, Putin will still be there. So Putin is a permanent enigma, and he is popular in Russia. Now let's accept that fact. The people vote out of him not for fear or a fixed election, but out of regard that he's a man leading us forward, and the Russians forward. So, gentlemen, I am very clear in my mind, all elections are flawed, and to that extent, the Russian election was also having some flaws. There was no recognizable opposition candidate opposing Putin, but at the same time, Putin was omnipresent. Everybody in Russia wanted him to win, and he won with a margin of 87% votes. There's nothing sad. If he was to make fixed elections, he could have done it in 1999 when he won only 53% vote. And the subsequent election, he won 63%. So every time his vote share has been going up. So, gentlemen, the resurrection or the arrival of Putin for another term is something that is not going to be liked by the Americans. For them, this is a very, very dangerous thing, and Putin like a red rag to a bull as far as America is concerned. America itself is thinking. I think instead of getting involved in Ukraine and how to control the Russians, it would be better they look inwards. You know, there's an old saying. If you want to see how you'll appear, look yourself in the mirror and let Biden and party and all these fellows look in the mirror. America is having a tremendous problem of illegal immigrants. Millions are going in there. And what is Biden or the Americans doing anything about it? Nothing. And they got almost $3 trillion. So what's going to be done? And as far as the European Union is concerned, they have a demographic problem. Aging population. Population aging. And what are they going to do about it? The woman having a low birth date. You need 2.1 to sustain a population. And some of the East European countries or others have a birth rate of just 1. So what is going to happen? And they got a 5th column in their ranks. The people they brought to do the menial job, that is the Islamists from the Middle East and North Africa. They don't subscribe to European values. So they would better look inward and see and improve their birth rate, because anything can happen. I don't want to make it state here, but I remember seeing a video, by one of the chiefs of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and he exhorted the Muslim migrants to go to Europe and fertilize the European women. I mean, it's a very silly thing, but it's precisely what he said. And that is what may happen. And that is called the Islamization of Europe. They might as well worry about that than about Russia and Ukraine. Russia is basically a Christian nation. And I think by logic it should be with the Western Europe. But then we have people with dreams, and Harold Robbins wrote that famous book, Dreams Die First. So Biden and Macron may bear that in mind. Well, gentlemen, I congratulate Vladimir Putin on this glorious victory. He's going to be there for another 6 years, and I hope India and Russia can move together further. I will close now, and I expect all of you to like my channel, share it with your friends, and come back for more. In the meanwhile, I will say, God bless. Bye-bye. Or should I say, Jai Shri Ram? So there it is. Jai Shri Ram. Bye-bye.